coming today. How many of you were at the game the other night? It was quite a game, and it's not all that often that LSU beats Kentucky, but this man, Dale Brown, won 19 times officially and 20 times unofficially against Kentucky. Nobody's ever beaten Kentucky more. And the gentleman to my left, Rudy Macklin, of course, is one of the greatest basketball players that ever come from the state of Kentucky, and he chose to come to LSU, and that was a game changer for this program. Rudy is the leading rebounder in the history of LSU. Not Bob Pettit, not Shaquille O'Neal, it's Rudy Macklin. And he's the second leading scorer in the history of LSU. And I think we know who number one is, the guy who's the leading scorer in the history of college basketball, major college basketball of all time, Pete Maravich. But Dale Brown, as Jessica stated, was here 25 years as head coach. And during that time, LSU enjoyed its biggest success on the basketball court. Some people may not realize that LSU's won as many SEC titles in basketball as it has at football. In fact, only Kentucky has won more. LSU's won 11, Kentucky's won 45. But nobody else has won more than 8. And Dale Brown was a big part of that. He won 4 regular season titles and 1 tournament championship as head coach. Led the Tigers to the Final Four on 2 occasions. And with Rudy Macklin in his 5 years here, 5 years because he was injured, LSU got better every year, going from 15 wins to 18 to 23 to 26. And in his senior year, 31 wins, 17-1 in the conference, a 26-game winning streak, and a Final Four appearance. And all of that probably would not have been possible without Rudy Macklin. So Dale Brown comes here in 1972. He's head coach for 4 years before Rudy arrives. Why don't we start with a reflection from you, Coach, on how those first 4 years were without Rudy?
Wow. I think that the thing that has to be very demonstratively explained today, with Rudy, and he's going to be humble, that was the major catalyst for us being able to go out and get blue chip players. This was LSU was the last bastion of racism as far as recruiting. You couldn't get a black player to come and visit. Numerous times, the parents would be nice, say, hey, I applied at LSU, the door was shut, da-da-da-da-da-da. They weren't interested. And I knew in order to break through to get a great player, and I'm not talking about a good player, a great player that everybody in the country wanted, we'd have to get someone like Rudy. Now, stupidest thing, where can we go to get one like that? Louisville, Kentucky, when you got Louisville on this side of him, Kentucky on this side of him, and here's the old pauper LSU coming in to get him. But the minute I met his mother and father, I didn't have anything to do with him as far as the kind of person he is. His mother and dad were phenomenal. The genes he had, the drive he had, him coming here really turned our program around. It was very tough in those early years, and I don't want to play the harp for you or give you a sad story, but coaching at LSU in the early years was kind of like this. A light could fall out of the ceiling. This actually happened. It broke on the floor. You could call the maintenance department and they would say to you, this is a little bit embellished, we'll be over there next week. Whereas in football, if one blade of grass was bent over in this field, send 50 trucks over in 50 minutes, straighten that blade of grass out. I'm not denying their greatness, but that's the analogy I can give you. And so Rudy was the catalyst to our greatness, and no doubt about that. I wouldn't probably be here today without a guy like Rudy. Was he easy to coach? Absolutely fantastic to coach. There never was, why me, how come this? He was a unifier. He brought guys together, had his mouth shut, never had a problem academically, and never dated a girl his whole time here. You answer that. You answer that, Rudy.
Well, Rudy was recruited by Kentucky and Louisville, and Dale Brown's knocking on his door. In fact, I think we know where he ended up going, but at one point, Dale was at the house about the same time as Denny Crum, wasn't he?
Well, he was there at the time when a bunch of them were there. My father would always, say to me, son, hurry up and make a decision so this house can get back to order. Because it was nonstop. I have to say, Coach Brown was the most polite and cordial coach that recruited me, and all the others were so, pushy, and they followed my family around in stores and shopping malls and asking for a decision. And it was not just the coaches itself, but those surrogate coaches, people who big fans of universities.
Wasn't your father's job threatened too?
My father's job was always threatened. He had a lot of Kentucky fans on his job, and because I was the one that got away, I was called Benedict Arnold. I was told that if I came to LSU that somebody would put voodoo on me and things like that, and they're still picking cotton fields, and that's the recruiting game. But Coach Brown was the one that came to our home and the one that stayed. He stayed, he had lunch with us and stayed a good while and got to tell us stories when he grew up. My mom grew up, my dad grew up, and I had no story to tell. And my mom knew then that he was the one. And I just never pictured myself going that far away from home, but I did. And it was a tough choice. But when I narrowed it down, and when he told me something that no other coach ever said to me, and that was a defining moment, he said that if you were to go to Louisville, Kentucky to play, he said they would do well whether you go there or not. He said, but if you come to LSU, you can always say you built something. And that was stuck in my mind. I went to bed on that. I told my mom the next day, I said, Mom, I want to build something. Like a kid had Lego toys. I want to build something. And that stuck in my mind. And I really came to love him when he called me one day and said, Rudy, I want you to watch us play against Auburn on TV this afternoon. He said, they'll be on at 2 o'clock your time. So my dad and I, we sat in the den, watched TV, and LSU was getting killed. They were losing by 30-something points. And my father said, son, this team's terrible. He said, they couldn't win the thing. God is seven. So they're pretty bad. So when the game was over, they're shaking hands, and the color analyst and the post guy, and the announcer talking about the post game, and I could see the teams going to the locker room, and all of a sudden the phone rings. And I said, Rudy, Coach Brown. I said, Coach? Oh man, I said, I just saw the game. I'm sorry about what happened to you. He said, I said, terrible loss. He said, oh, okay, we'll bounce back. He said, look, now you see why we need you? That's one of my favorites, but playing for him has been a joy. Everything he said that would happen, happened. And now I'm 18 years old, I have to go and accept his dream. And his dream had to be mine. When you put two dreams together, you wonder if this is what it's going to be when you get there. And everything he said was going to happen. It happened, and it happened and some. And at 18 years old, you never think that you could be one person that can make a difference. But it was not one person, it was this one person and this one person. It was the two of us that built something. And that's why we see all of you here today, because we had the courage to build. His task was tougher than mine, because he had to convince a football state that it could become a basketball state. And he did that. And that's probably, that makes him probably the best coach around at that time in the country.
No, just hold on the microphone. But your first game against Tulane, you're 18 years old, you get 32 rebounds. That is still the school record. 32 rebounds in one game. It happened in his first game as a freshman at LSU.
Before he answers that, let me set it up for him. There was an article, I can't remember who did it or not. Might have been Pete Finney, but I'm not sure. There's an article in the New Orleans paper. There was a kid in New Orleans, a good player named Carl Zuniga. We were interested in him, but there was a way different atmosphere with Rudy, what we wanted. So when we signed Rudy and did not get Zuniga, he went to Tulane. The article came out and said that LSU messed up. This Carlos Zuniga is a better player than. Oh, I clipped that out. He'll tell you the rest of the story.
I get to the locker room, and where we get our uniforms in this little window, there's a bulletin board. Coach Brown comes in, didn't say a word to anybody, and put the article on the board. And if you ever know my roommate, Greg Cookie Man Cook, He always starts things. Mac, look what Coach Brown did. Can you believe this? He put that article on the bulletin board saying that Carlos Uga better than you. I said, don't worry about that, we're okay. But my mind was in a different place at the time because I was kind of, tormented by the fact that the first game we had played before that against Athletes in Action, hardly anybody came to the game. And I told my mom, I said, Mom, I don't know if I made a mistake or not, because nobody seems to be interested in basketball here. And I said, I went to the media day. My buddy Charles Alexander invited me to go to media day for football, and all the media outlets from all over the country showed up. And media day for LSU, we only had the Daily Reveille and the Morning Advocate. I think I made a mistake. She said, oh no, you're staying right there. She said, you made a commitment, you gotta stick to it. She said, son, you never know, you may be the one to make the difference. He said, that's why they got you there. I said, well, I don't know. And then when he put the article on the bulletin board, that gave me even more incentive. And I could not wait to face Carlos Uga. I know this young man didn't know me from Adam when I was going out to destroy him. And so they had a big front line, and I did everything that came off the glass. And I had no idea that it got to 32.
Wasn't it Brooklyn only got, the pro team only got 17 rebounds last night? Yeah. The whole team got 17. And
it was a blessing and a curse in a way, because after that, I had 3 or 4 people trying to box me out at a time every game. So I got double teamed every game. And so it was one of those defining moments, and it lit a match. And I got calls from all over the country and articles in Sports Illustrated, and I got my size to do what I did, but it was all precipitated by what he did as a coach. He knew how to push the right button to ignite me to do something, an ordinary person to do something extraordinary. And that's the good marking of a great coach.
Let me make another comment about Rudy too. I forgot. Art told us, my assistant, the big Greek that had black hair, sent him to watch what was considered by many maybe one of the best high school games in the state that year. Darrell Griffith, who was a great All-American, and Rudy were going to play one of them. Now, this was totally unrehearsed. It was a miracle. Sometimes I wonder if the good Lord didn't intervene on Rudy coming here. So the game ends. Rudy and Darrell have this big battle. There are 2 teams. They're going down the steps. Wasn't the gym upstairs? Yeah. Going down the steps. There's a man to the right, to the left of Artolis, and he said, what'd you think of the game? Artolis had no idea who was it. That's a pretty good game, he said. He's what? Good players. I said, I'll tell you what. He said, there's one exceptional player out there. He's that darn Rudy Macklin. He's really good. I'd take him over Darrell Griffith. And the guy says, you take him over Darrell Griffith? I sure would. He says, he's quick, he's fast as a cat, he's really a good player. He said, my name is Elbert Macklin, I'm Rudy's dad.
Well, that first year, it was a rebuilding year, and LSU, under Coach Brown, started 3 other freshmen, and Greg Cook, and Rick Maddock, and Jordy Holker, and also had Kenny Higgs. So you had a junior and 4 freshmen, and you won 15 games that year. Did you know you had turned the corner?
It was obviously a major stimulant to turn the corner. I knew it was going to happen. To say yes would be the truth. Yeah, I did. I knew we turned the corner. One more comment, we'll get off Rudy. One of the most gallant ways I've ever seen a young man handle something that was totally unfair, totally unjust. We're playing in the Final Four, and that's when President Reagan was shot. I'm standing over there, I can hear off to the side this reporter digging him. We just had lost the game, what do you think, should the game have been played? Rudy said, I'm not into that. That's other, and I can't give you everything that was said, but I can give you the nucleus of what was said, and he got burned all over the country. And the guy said, well, as a poor thing, he said, sorry, I know that, well, it wasn't like it happened to my relative or something, but he said, I'm sorry that happened, but he said, you got to go on and play the game. That guy wrote an article and took Rudy apart, the guy, and all the what, totally a lie what he said. One of my kin, that isn't what he said at all. He was just trying to say, you got to go on. This is something that happened. And he didn't fight back. And I was livid. Now, you that know me know I never get livid, so that's unusual to get livid. But it was just really a tremendous injustice. But again, coming from a good home, gave him that courage inside and the discipline to handle it much nicer than I would have at that age.
Well, you've already jumped to the end of his career. So I guess we can need him now. There were a lot of things that happened between the freshman year and the senior season, but since Coach Brown brought up that Final Four, you played hurt. Actually, people may not remember, but LSU was the favorite going into that Final Four and led Indiana by 3 points at halftime. But Rudy was hurt, and the second half against Indiana was not a good one. And I know that affected you immensely, not only at that time, but for many years thereafter.
Yeah, it did. You know, basketball is a team sport. And when you get to that level and to the height of that Final Four, it becomes about matchups. And me being plagued with this injury, you know, I couldn't. Up until that point,
It was a hand injury.
yeah, up until that point,
Broken finger.
I could beat my matchup. It becomes whatever he throws out there to us, we have to execute. But when you get your matchup, it's up to me. I have to beat my man. And I've been beating everybody up to that point. And when you get to your matchup, it's like football. When you're blocking somebody on the offensive line or defensive line, you have to beat your man. And I didn't beat my man that day. And that's something you live with for the rest of your life. You know, that was something that I've always sleep about and dream about. Said another day, if I would have had him healthy, I would have beat my man. I wanted to beat my man, Landon Turner, you know, somebody who I respect tremendously. And he was bigger than I was, but quicker, just as quick as I was. But I wanted to beat him that day. And so I've always took pride in beating my assignments, because I was runner-up for the national title in the one-on-one competition in high school. And I always took pride in beating one-on-one. But that day, you know, and because I didn't want to let him down, didn't want to let you all down, the university down, I put a lot on me, because I like doing that. And I was a fifth-year senior, I was a leader. But just that day, you know, I didn't beat my man. And that's something I always regret the rest of my life. And you have to give credit to Landon Turner and the job he did. And but I told him, I said, if it was another day and a healthy Rudy Macklin, I would have got you.
What do you recall about that season?
Oh, that season was magical because, you know, we weren't a big team, you know, but Coach put together a very quick team, a fast team. We did so much. He put together a team to where you could not focus on one person because somebody would burn you. And I drew all the double teams. And I had a Howard Carter, I had a Willie Sims, I had Ethan Martin. And everything fed off me first. And when you try to get me, then they'll get you. And losing early in the season kind of helped us because we were ranked high. We may be a little cocky. And we lost to Arkansas at the Alaska Shootout. And that's when he came to me. He said, you can't try to carry everything alone. You know, you're putting too much pressure on yourself. You gotta learn how to relax and have fun playing the game. He said, you're putting too much on yourself. And that's why I had to learn the mental aspect of the game, that you can't carry it on your own all the time. And so that run through the SEC of 17 in a row was just remarkable, because at the time the SEC was the toughest conference in the country. I mean, Ole Miss, you could lose to them at home. You could lose to Vanderbilt at home easily, but we painstakingly went through that SEC, and not losing a single game at home was extraordinary. The only game that we should have won, if the referee hadn't swallowed the whistle when we knocked Howard Carter down, we would have went undefeated. But and then marching through the tournament itself, you know, was a sure joy, because we had something that the other opponents had that they didn't have. We had a senior dominated team. We played well together. We were fast, we were quick. And we owned the glass, always. He did not like to lose a rebounding battle. That's just the way he was. And we had to play defense. Yeah, and so we had all those elements going with us. And we had a scare, with Alcorn State. And but it woke us up. We just can't. He would say, you can't walk in an arena and expect people to bow down to you, no matter who they are. And we had to learn that lesson from him. And so all the lessons he taught us, he didn't have to teach us a whole lot anymore because we grew up with him and become seniors, and he said, okay, now you know better, go get it done. And that's all he had to say. And so we did that, and just, it's a special time in your life. I believe these things are bestowed upon you. Everybody didn't get as far as we got. I mean, programs around the country would love to be in the position we were in, to be in that type of spotlight, and to win as many games as we did. Winning is the thing that I like to hold dear to my heart more than personal records. Those are going to be there, but I can say I won a whole lot of games at LSU, more than anybody else.
Right.
If I know my records, 104 games, more than anybody at LSU. But see, when we win, you all win too. The state wins. Our state wins. It wasn't, as much as I love Pete Marriage, it was Pete Marriage, but with us, it was LSU. Okay, everybody wants to see Pete play, but everybody came to see LSU play when we played because we won, and it was all about winning with us, and that's a beautiful thing. To come to a state where nobody expected you to win, and then they get a guy from Monarch, North Dakota, and another guy from Kentucky to turn it around so that everybody can be where you are today. It's special.
There's two things when Rudy talks that come to my mind. The word hindsight and the old thing which we've all heard when we're down and out, good will come from bad if you make it happen. The hindsight, his pain, really, when you have time to look back at it, you make a lot of coaching mistakes. In fact, at the end of my career, 44 years of coaching, I pondered what I was going to do. I was going to take a month off. Was I going to run for Senate? Was I going to go to law school? Was I going to be a motivational speaker? What was I going to do? I didn't want to coach anymore. So I looked back at my career, and the first thing I noticed really were my limitations and my mistakes and my distance from the ideal, even though you try to do that. In hindsight, had I had that to do all over again, Indiana would have never beaten us with his broken finger or not. I knew Bobby Knight, how he prepared. I knew they were going to double down. I knew this was his target. So what I should have done to take pressure off him, because he's really conscious. He's a very sensitive person. He's tougher than hell, but he's very sensitive. He didn't want to let anybody down. I knew he was going to go out there with not full steam ahead. So I should have gone with a smaller lineup, not started him, started Willie Sims, spread the court out a little more, and I thought, what are they going to do? Their game plan, their defensive game plan, and I would have given him time to sit on the bench and kind of get his breath, and I think we could have won that way. The second thing, Rudy talks about the pain of losing. After you lose something like that, because there's no question, I never publicly stated this. I knew we were going to win the national championship. How can you do that? Just like I knew we were going to, I just knew. I saw the spirit in the team. But they had 26 straight wins. That's the most in the history of LSU of any sport, baseball, football, anybody else, track and field. They also had the most wins in the nation that year and the most 31 wins. And they're the only team in history to win 17 straight games in a row in the SEC regular conference. However, what came out of it, I didn't make this public, but had we won the 1981 championship, I was seriously thinking of retiring from coaching. I didn't want to stay too long. I didn't want to be in something. And these guys were so much fun. They were fearless. They loved each other. They had different personalities, a lot of different, but they all understood really this simple slogan: the best potential of me is we. And we had a fearless little point guard. Everybody asked, who's the best point guard you ever coached in your life? Automatically, everybody's going to say, Mahmoud, Chris Jackson. It's hard to beat Ethan Martin. So good came from bad.
A few moments ago, you stated that the first year with Rudy, you knew you had turned the corner. The second year, it was apparent, and it became apparent February 11th, 1978. The Kentucky team.
What time?
You're
going to need your stats down, get a break.
10:02. The Kentucky team that would win the national titles, playing few yards away from us. They only lost 2 games that year, and one of them was that night, and LSU had lost its 5 starters, including Rudy, to fouls, and in overtime beats the future national champion Kentucky. What do you recall about that game, Rudy?
The first thing I recall is, Coach Brown, if you know he's a great motivational speaker. And we used to give these motivational speeches all the time. But this game, he gave the shortest speech we've ever heard. And we looked around at each other, and Cookie Man said, let's go before he comes back and changes his mind. And so that short speech fired us up so much. I know the Kentucky players for years, even in high school, we all played pickup games. Guess what? We had the greatest respect for James Lee and Gibbons and those guys, and we all knew each other. But the greatest respect that we gave to each other, we brought our best every time we played. And the arena was so packed. I mean, I don't believe you could get a roach in there at the time. People sat in the stairwells, and everybody stood. The fire marshal just wasn't on his job because everybody just packed and plugged themselves in the spaces where they could stand. And I remember not being able to hear, on the court, because we always like to talk on defense like he taught us. But we had to go with hand signals, eye contact, and just do the best we could because we could not hear because it was so loud. And just to look around at Jordy Hobart, on the way to the arena, he said, man, look, this is something. He said, now we see people like we used to see football games when it was hard to get tickets, holding up 2 fingers for tickets. He said, now they were coming to LSU basketball outside the PMAC, holding up fingers for tickets, because the tickets were hard to come by unless you knew Greg Cookie Man Cook, who was sneaky through the back door. So that was his thing. He used to, kids that couldn't afford to get in the game, he said, just go in and stand around. And so that game was just, being over anxious, having hard to calm down, and people calling me from around the country, wanting to know, was I ready? And it was just, we were ready, and he had prepared us well. And I knew we were not going to lose that game that day. No way we would lose, and I missed only 1 shot the whole game, so I was definitely.
You remember when you found out?
I found out because I was so upset about it because I knew I was on my way to probably a 50-point game. I was just that hot, and but whenever you play against Kentucky, I'm never a complainer of referees. You're always playing against at least 6 or 7 people. Whenever you about to blow Kentucky out, the whistle starts to blow. And it happened that game. When we got on the roll, the whistle started to blow. And it was like ticky-tack fouls. And I was just telling the ref, let us play, And we all filed out, the starters anyway. But he calls our reserves reinforcements, and not backups, they're reinforcements. And when you got a Willie Sims for a reason for reinforcement, you got to have a team. And he was the reinforcement along with Ernie Brown and Floyd Bailey, those guys. And so our reinforcements just held up, what we do every day in practice.
Rudy's 32 rebounds could possibly be broken. He's part of history that'll never be broken. There's 2 things, 2 basketball records. You say never. I'm going to be very loose and say never. They'll never be broken. 2 of these things occurred at LSU. 3 things in basketball that will never be broken, period. We all can live as long as Methuselah, and we'll never see this record broken. 1, we'll never see a basketball team that plays the #1 team in the country, that wins the national championship, and that basketball team has all 5 of their starters fouled out and they win the game. That'll never happen. It'll never happen just because of the odds of it, not because of the sensational kids we had coming off the bench, but just the odds of it. Have you ever heard that, where all 5 starters were fouled out of the game? And we did get holes in a couple of your goals, by the way. By the way, before I go into the other 2 records, I got to tell you a story about referees. It's kind of funny. Most of you will not remember this guy. He was an old timer by the name of Abel Evans, coached at Oklahoma City. Just an old country guy, kind of good sense of humor. And he coached basketball the way it should. He loved kids. He was a disciplinarian, but it wasn't like, oh, the sun's going to rise and set. No, he never used anybody. Good sense of humor. He got the job at Texas, and we're at the Final Four, and he tells, there is one of the most handsome men in the room coming in, Collis Temple III. So he said, Dale, it was the Final Four, he was telling me this. We went to play to Texas. Nobody knows who I am. And he said, Texas, big shots, all the politicians. And he said, it was Arkansas. He was at Texas. He'd gone to Texas now. We're playing at Arkansas. I screwed that up. So he said, we won 2 games all year. He said, we're playing 2 minutes in the game, and I told my assistant, we're 40 points behind, we're still getting screwed by these officials. Damn, I'm gonna let them know I'm gonna be around in this league. I'm gonna call timeout, you take the team. Coach, don't do that. I'm gonna call timeout and let them know, damn, I'm upset. So he said, I stood up and I called timeout. And he said, I was gonna talk to him. So I waved him over like this, and he stood stoic, like regarding the Berlin Wall, strict, well, I'm not doing a real good job of communicating, Dale. So he said, I was almost in a fetal position. I waved like this, and the guy came running over. So I knew I had him now. I got to communicate with him. So he said, I put my arm around him. Mr. Referee, hell, he games over. 40 points behind, but he said, my sister and I we coaches, we're a bunch of phonies. We never read books. He said, don't you guys actually have 2 kind of books you read? Isn't there a book called a case book that has scenarios of what's going on? And you have to test it in that. And he did the rule book, too. He said, I couldn't take the rule. He said, my assistant doesn't either. So just for clarification, he said, is there anything in the rule book that says a referee can call a foul on a coach for something like that? Thinks on the bench? Obviously not. Good. I think all 3 of you are son of a bitches. And he didn't get a technical. The 2 other records will never be broken. He's part of one of them. Nobody will ever do that. The second record will never be broken. No one will ever break 44.2 points a game by Pistol Pete. To put that into perspective, no shot clock, no 3-point line, still he scored 44.2 points. If you want to break it, you have to go to school for 4 years, score 15 3-pointers every game you play to break this record by 0.8 of a point. The third record that will never be broken, no one will win 10 national championships like John Wooden.
By the way, Hugh Buckingham said I should ask the 2 of you, who are both members of the LSU Athletic Hall of Fame, and Pete Maravich should be in the hall.
Should Jesus be in heaven?
He's already in there.
Pretty simple.
I didn't know that. I really did not know that.
Yeah.
That's a shame. Well, what can we do to change it?
I guess talk about it some more.
You're gonna change the rule.
Well, they've already changed the rule for one guy, so it would seem that Pete could be an exception. He's not coming back to get a degree.
Well, then you open the floodgates for a lot of others. You got a player like Joyce Walker that played at LSU, the greatest.
Didn't she get her degree?
No, she did not.
Yes, she did.
She did? Finally?
Just got it.
Just got
Right,
it.
Just
Okay,
got it.
well,
Just
yeah.
got it. Right.
You have several.
And she
others.
should be in.
Yeah. That's
You
not bad.
take Simone, I'll take Joyce.
Okay.
Could be a good game.
Oh, yeah. But it's just, but if you do that, which I love to see him in it, don't get me wrong. But then you got to open the doors for the others that are in the same predicament.
Can I say something that's probably not planned, but you know me, so if you had notes, throw those things away. I would do this building an injustice and that display over there of first black student to ever come here. Guy sitting over here, Collis Temple. First black basketball player ever played here. That sounds like it's fairly easy. It isn't. There's a whole combination reason. But let me tell you something. A lot of people don't know about him and the kind of home he came up in. Dad was a principal, mother a teacher, in the middle of the Ku Klux Klan in Bogalusa, Louisiana. He came in, we're playing Vanderbilt.
Britney Spears.
Bogalusa, I'm thinking that Jim
Bogalusa. I know what he looking like, but it's he's Bogalusa.
Was the Klan
You thought he was A.Z. Young, right? Come on.
Was the Klan worse than Bogalusa or Kendall? Anyway.
But they win both spots, so
Okay.
you know we're talking.
Anyway, what showed me that he'd be successful in life, we're playing at Vanderbilt. talking to the team, who would knock on the door at halftime? I saw the manager go out, and pretty soon I saw the manager come fidgeting around, kind of wanted to talk to me. Not, Coach, he said, somebody needs to talk to you out loud. What? He said, somebody wants to talk to you out loud. Who wants to? He said, the police. They need some emergency. Well, did somebody die? So I went out in the hall. Here's a whole corridor of armed policemen, some with their vests on and their helmets and whatever. And the one guy, sheriff, excuse me, you're a deputy sheriff. This guy was a sheriff Kelvin. Not Barney Fife like you. So anyway, he said, Coach Brown, we got some news. He said, we just traced a call that came from in this building. And he said, it came from a payphone. We couldn't get there quick enough, but the call said, quote, if that nigger Lovin Brown comes out the second half and the nigger on his team Temple comes out, they're going to be shot down the phone. So he said, what do you want to do? Hell, I'm going out. I can't speak for this young man. So I went in, I called him out in the hall, and I said, tell him what you said, Chief. He told him, just almost unaffected. It's too bad, I'm playing. We had armed guards take us to our hotel during the night. Each of us had an armed guard swept by the, didn't phase him. It phased him maybe internally, but his path to where he is now wasn't easy.
Back to basketball.
Oh, wait a minute, man, you sound like a damn sports writer. Isn't this about life?
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute, Cos, we don't have anything to do with basketball. Did you hear what Jim said?
I'm listening.
Uh-huh.
Third year that Rudy's here. That's the 78-79 season, and LSU wins its first Southeastern Conference title in 25 years. But Rudy gets hurt, and the team goes on and wins the championship without him. And I know you were pulling hard for the team, but that had to be a big disappointment.
I was disappointed that I couldn't join my teammates, but I had faith in them. I had faith in Coach. We had a heck of a team now. Without me, Al Green at the time, Lionel Green, and Cookie, and Scales, and then Willie. So we had, and the bench was loaded too. So we had a heck of a team even without me. And when I did come back, I was a pretty good practice player. To help him out and gave him moral support also, but it just goes to show you the type of players he had put together on the floor.
That team, well, before I get to the tournament, I remember I was a student then, and with about a minute to go in the game and LSU ahead by about 10 or 12 points, Dale Brown decides the banner declaring LSU SEC champion should be unfurled while the game is still in progress, much to the chagrin of C.M. Newton, who was coach of Alabama at the time. I'm sure you recall that.
What game was that? No, that's not totally valid. It's close to being valid. We were going to win the championship.
Right.
Either that game or the next one. We were going to win, no question. So they formed, they had 25 years. There was no banners in there. First banners they hung, I had them built for Bob Pettit. There was nothing in that building. And so we had a banner ready to unfurl if we won it at the end of the game. So we were looking up and everybody was hollering. The guy was up there like this here hollering, let it go. And maybe one of my assistants said, we should just let him go. I just said, go ahead, no big deal.
So I recall you were going,
No, I was not up on the castle.
I think he made the comment after the game that the man's in the desert for 25 years.
That's right.
And he needs water. It's time to give him some water. So.
Well, it didn't have anything to do with the game. We were, 20-some ahead.
Yeah, you were way ahead.
There's no way to.
But that team in '79 lost to Michigan State in the tournament. The game that was, like, you were in the Sweet 16. This would have been the Elite Eight. Lose to Michigan State and Magic Johnson. And I recall you saying after the game that if not for the injury to Macklin and the suspension of Dwayne Scales, you would have won the national championship. Do you still believe that?
When you say things to a team, sometimes you can say, well, and I'm going to give an example of that when we played Kentucky at Kentucky. Yes, I did. And scale suspension would have never had to occur. You know, it was a deal we had about agents and et cetera, but we would have made a good run at the national title.
Yeah, that might have been your
They
best,
would've
that
won.
might have been your best team. You had Al Green, you had Scales, you had Macklin, you had,
It was good, but
Even Martin.
81 was pretty darn good too.
well, 81, they were older, but
Yeah.
you didn't have Al Green.
Yeah.
And you didn't
Yeah,
have
no,
Scales.
it was.
That was the best.
Yeah.
79.
Yeah.
And that, and you went down with a leg injury,
Yeah, I broke my foot. And,
and there was some
At
talk-
DePaul,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
no, it was here. We was gonna
Before we played DePaul.
Right. That was my ankle against DePaul. But here we was about to play Oral Roberts, and we had a
Should have gone over and had Oral look at it.
we had a shoot around, and we did a rebound, fast break drill. I just got a rebound and came down and snapped. So it was one of those freak accidents, so to speak.
But if you had not been redshirted that year, and they allowed a red shirt because you'd not played any SEC games, but if you'd not had a red shirt, you wouldn't have been around for the 81 team. So it's kind of a trade-off.
Good comes from bad.
But I you know, as a somewhat neutral observer, I think that might have been your best team. That you probably would have won the national title.
That or the 81 team, no question. Overall talent, that team was the best.
Well, in 1980, you came back. You got Rudy, you got Scales, and that was a year of misses. And I recall the game for the SEC championship that year, final game of the regular season. Kyle Macy hit a shot. I think it was in double overtime. Hit a shot that they didn't have a three-pointer then, but it was probably 30 feet out to beat you.
On a very controversial call, we had the ball stalling, that so-called 5-second call, which is stupid, they should eliminate. There's a clock, let the clock take care of the game. Terrible call and a terrible rule.
And you lost to Kentucky, and then came back and won the SEC tournament championship, beating Kentucky. And then go to the NCAA tournament, and you draw your friend Darrell Griffith in the final of the regional.
Yeah, Darrell and I, we go back to ninth grade, and I knew him. I knew all those guys on the team because I went home every summer and played pickup games there, so we all knew each other. And that was a very, very talented team. Quickness, jumping ability, and Darrell was probably one of the best closers of any game. The last 5 minutes of the game, he'll take it over. And he's been like that since the 8th grade. And so going up against my best friend like that, knowing what he was capable of, and with the people he had around him, we knew it was going to be a tough battle. It was real tough.
Let me make a comment about Rudy's parents that just came to my mind. Not a lot of times, but there's an occasion that parents will have delusions of grandeur about our loved ones. And sometimes there will be an occasion until you let them know that's not going to happen. Parents will really get, selfish about who plays and whatever. Every time I talk to his mom or dad, his mom in particular, I can still hear, sweet little voice, Coach Brown, how's my baby doing in school? Never asked me his stats. Never said, do you think he's going to be an all-star? How's my baby doing in school? So guess who graduated on time? Her baby.
And he was SEC Player of the Year his senior year. I think second team All-American. And if not for the Final Four, that would have been remembered as one of the great years by any player at any time in college basketball. But you lose to Indiana, lost the consolation game to Virginia, and then you come home and you're waiting for the draft, and you get drafted by Atlanta. And first game's against Julius Erving, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, that was my childhood hero. My brother called me before the game. My brother, he likes to pick at me. He said, well, little brother, you going against our boy, So I said, yeah, I am. He said, just don't get dunked on. And so in the NBA, they have a saying that the best respect you give to your opponents to bring your best game. And so Coach Lockery said, whatever you do, don't get caught looking at him. Because he's so spectacular, he'll turn into a sideshow, and you get caught up looking at him, and you're burning every time. And the first play I did, I made a bad mistake. I didn't need to pass and caused my center to get dunked on. Tree Rollins, who was 7'1", and he shouted, he screamed at me, "Don't you ever do that again!" And so I scored 25 points against him, and then we lost 1 point. And from that day forward, he and I really developed a pretty good kinship, Julius and I. And so a great player to look up to. He set the standard in the NBA about how players should carry themselves off the court in terms of how we dress, business dress all the time. And so he made that move in the NBA on his own. And so everybody followed his lead at the time. So playing against my idol, the first game in the NBA was really something special.
First game we came to see him play, we flew up in a plane.
It was Boston.
It was against Larry Bird, and I remember I was thinking, wow, how are you going to handle him? If memory serves me right, you outscored him that game.
I burned him too. Larry wasn't very good on defense. People don't know that.
Did you win that game?
We won that.
Yeah.
It was playoffs. Yeah.
Ted Turner was drunk sitting in the front row. You don't have to talk about your owner.
He was always talking about that anymore.
Well, you mentioned Collis, the first African American to play basketball at LSU, and in the span of 10 years, the school goes from no blacks to 5 black starters under Dale Brown. That was quite a transformation.
Yes, and it started, I've told you this story to some intimate friends that I have. But when I came here for the interview, I was a no-name guy from North Dakota. I had no connections. I was not played a small NAIA school. And when I went in for the interview, the very first question asked me by this. There's only one of those people living on that selection committee now is Ned Clark. There were three members of the selection committee and Mr. Maddox. They had narrowed it down to the 5 best head coaches in the country and the 5 best assistants. The 5 best head coaches in the country turned it down. I didn't care if 50,000 others would have turned it down. If I would have been offered the job, I would have taken it. But the very first question, and I had never been in the Deep South. I had some negative opinions, about. I didn't know what warm and wonderful the people were. So I was a little scared of what I was getting into. Very first question the guy asked me. He was polite, had this southern drawl and a big old sombrero hat there. Coach Brown, he said, "Why should we ever hire you?" He said, "Well, what will you do any different? No one's ever been able to make us a national power. Why should you hire? Why should we hire you?" And I said to him, who's now dead, my dear friend Warren Brown, I said, "Mr. Brown, you probably shouldn't hire me until you all hear my philosophy." I said, "If I get this job, I will promise you I'll do my very best to represent LSU, this city, and this state. And also, you should know this ahead of time. I may have 5 blacks playing. I may have 5 whites playing. I may have 5 Mexicans playing." I didn't say Mexicans, I said international players. I said, "I'm going to recruit human beings first and basketball players second." And then I went in and answered the question. When I was going to the state tournament in Alexandria, there weren't cell phones at that time, and I stopped in Bunkie, Louisiana, in a drugstore. And there was a phone booth in there for a nickel, if memory serves me right. I called home, talked to my wife. I told her the story, and I can still remember what she said. "Dale, Dale, Dale. You should have been a kamikaze pilot in the Japanese Air Force. You had more of a chance then. You'll never get the job." 1 week later, I came down, and thanks to a man by the name of Carl Maddox, I was fortunate enough to represent you people for 25 years.
Coach Brown mentioned recently he had 160 players in his 25 years, and that counts everybody, from Tito Horford, who was here for a cup of coffee, to Rudy Macklin, who was here for 5 years. But as far as we can tell, of those 160 players, some of them, like Collis, are in the room, not one was ever charged or has ever been charged with a felony. And there's only a few misdemeanors in that group as well. And so these were quality young men, and I'm sure they benefited from the experience playing for Coach Brown. And if you could talk a bit about that and what he talked about beyond basketball that made you who you are today.
When I first came to LSU, I signed my letter of intent, and I came to campus, and I had this fear that nobody knew about. I was afraid of this. I was afraid of microphones. And I was afraid of speaking in public. And Coach Brown got with my academic counselor and said, I want you to work with him. And Bob Harrison got with me. And he said, I saw your interview. He said, besides tearing up the King's language, you seem like you're nervous. And he said, you got this Kentucky drawl. And he said, we're going to fix that. He said, because you're going to get interviewed a lot. And we want you to be prepared and represent not only the university, but yourself as well. And so he's put me in speech class. I had speech therapy. Teach me how to pronounce my words correctly. I can hear my teacher now, no, Mr. Macklin, you have to enunciate. Enunciate your hard words well. It's H-E-R-E is here, not her. And going through speech therapy for a couple of semesters and learning how to deliver speeches and write speeches. And I used to always had to deliver my speeches that I wrote in front of we stayed in Broussard Hall where all the athletes stayed. And we had study hall there or classrooms, you remember Palace. And I had to deliver all the athletes were my critics. So I had to deliver my speech in front of all the football players, basketball players, tennis players, wrestlers, everybody, and they all critiqued me. And that was my lesson there. And that opened up so many doors for me. And I didn't realize how much until I ran into Bob Love, who played for the Chicago Bulls, and how he had his stuttering problem, and how the doors closed to him when it came to endorsements. And he and I was at a banquet together at Southern in his honor. And he said, Rudy, if I had what you had back then, for somebody to work with me on my ability to speak, I would have made millions of dollars in endorsements. And because he, Bob Harrison, and College Temple recognized what I had, and then I needed some work, I'm able to this day sit here with confidence and talk to you all in a manner to which I didn't have no idea I could be able to do. I've been in numerous commercials. I've narrated documentaries, all because
And your own TV show.
my own TV show, a time or two, and all because of what he and College Temple and Bob Harrison saw. They took the time to make sure that whenever I was interviewed, I was ready. And so it wasn't all about basketball with him and him. And with him, with College Temple, it was about what classes are you taking? Let me see your class schedule. He didn't care that I was one of the top players in the country coming out of high school. He said, when I first met him, he said, I'm College Temple. I said, okay. He said, I used to play basketball here. And I said, okay. He said, let me see your schedule. He said, you don't need this, you don't need this. You take that back to that man over there, that academic counselor, you tell him, I said, this is your schedule that you should take because we all want you to graduate. These are the things, the foundations that you have to have to become who I am now. Because if they didn't see these things, these flaws in me, I wouldn't be able to be the director of minority health for the state of Louisiana. I wouldn't be able to be the director of the Governor's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports in Louisiana. I wouldn't be who I am today because they took the time to say, you have a problem. We're going to fix it and we're going to make you better. That's LSU. Not LSU basketball, but that's LSU. And if I didn't, what other coaches around the country, or probably other schools I would went to, took the time to say, you have a speaking problem. You stutter when you talk. You don't pronounce your words correctly. But we're going to fix that for you because that's what we do. It's not about just basketball, it's about academics. It's about making you a better person. Between these two, this is what makes me who I am today. So it's not all about basketball really.
Let me tell you how good he got. He asked me if he'd take a French class. I said, sure. Does anyone speak French in here? I said, why do you want to speak French? He said, I want to say, he said, a friend told me, what does chérie, je t'aime mean? I said, it means darling, I love you. That's why I want to take French. Every girl on campus heard that. Chérie, je t'aime. He was very fluent. That's no joke either. The truth eventually emerges.
I forgot about that one.
You forgot that one.